Hello, everyone. It's always a challenge to talk in a post-lunch session, especially coming on the back of Ronnie Screwvala, who has always said all the relevant things in Indian media as far as I remember. Ronnie, first on a personal note, I think I qualify for a job in your system because I still haven't learned how to do a PowerPoint. I still don't know how to do an Excel. And standing before this huge crowd of MBAs from IIMs, I have to admit that I'm not an MBA. So all three eminent qualifications to get a job with Ronnie Screwvala. I would just, Suresh was very kind and gracious in his description of what I did. But I would like to take you forward and just talk a little bit about how I see what's happening with Indian media today. Suresh referred to the speech that I made recently, and I take up from where I left in that speech at Fiki Frames. And the one thing that strikes me very strongly is that funny dichotomy that exists in Indian media today. On the surface, it does appear that nothing much has changed. Cable TV story remains the same. Poor service, technological challenges, and a hugely challenged business model. The digitization initiative of Indian media delivery continues to struggle, and the DTH, which had started as a ray of fresh hope, which promised to revolutionize Indian television distribution and the content experience that people would have, continues to debate whether new initiatives like HD, let alone things like broadband and triple play and quadruple play, are worth their while or not. Even on the other fronts like advertising, there was an amazing revolution in the 90s that I think Indian media contributed to, and many of you were part of it, would have seen it or would have benefited from it. It often goes unnoticed that a lot of Indian brands that have been created today, the likes of Nirma and even the big brands launched by the multinational companies in consumer goods and consumer durables, were created on the evening prime time of Indian television. I don't think there is another example anywhere in the world where in such a short span of time, such a large number of big national and regional brands have been created, which did not exist a few years before the television revolution, cable and satellite revolution began, and which became household names over just a few years. But unfortunately, even that process seems to have gone in a bit of a loop, because the second generation of brand revolution doesn't seem to be taking off. Part of it has to do with the infrastructure challenges, but part of it has to do with the lack of vision that both brand builders and media entrepreneurs have not been able to display. And for content, it's a story that is all too familiar. Every time that I go and introduce myself as a content creator or as the chief executive of Star, who is responsible for providing a lot of content, people have a complaint or two on the so-called quality of content. Breakouts like Satyamev Jayate notwithstanding. And a lot of those complaints are true, because we still continue to use and remain trapped in the cliches that are hackneyed. The country has moved on from there, but unfortunately the media and the content community still seems to be hanging on to those. So all in all, it looks like a pretty placid environment where not much is happening. And yet, when I see this as a content person or as a media executive, I see a huge disruption at another level that's playing out. And that's what I just wanted to point out to you people, because I'm sure you're interested in what's happening in India, and yet you don't, because of your physical separation, you don't get to see that on a daily basis. Let me just point out a few examples. Suresh mentioned this group called AIB. It's a group of 4 youngsters, all under 30. These are, with really people who walk into corporate offices wearing flip-flops and shorts. But these are not techies. These are not nerds from Silicon Valley who who are more comfortable, who people are more comfortable seeing in those attires. These are a group of guys who call themselves comics. Their acronym is AIB, and mostly they are known as AIBs only because the full name is so offensive usually to the Victorian Indian sensibilities, because it stands for All India Bakchod. And nobody wants to use that in either newspapers or in television, let alone in the official parlance. And yet, they have made probably more waves than any other creative group in India in the last year or 18 months. And what did they do? They had the gall to, they started with their comical, satirical stuff as a user-generated channel on YouTube. And very soon, they graduated to doing a roast, which created reactions from everyone in the country. They took pot shots at Bollywood stars, and they were so edgy that Indian police, because it doesn't have much to do in the area of curbing crime, etc., had to swing into action to catch them, because they were damaging the Indian moral fabric. And it did not take, while all this was going on, it did not take much time for the Indian creative community to take note of what the AIB was doing. And they immediately graduated to doing serious content, including on Star, where we invited them to create a show. And this is a group of people which, for the first time, is using the power of humor, satire, etc., to comment on the Indian political system, to comment on Indian judiciary, to comment on Indian police, fire stations, etc. That's the kind of change that's happening. They're changing the definition of creativity the way it is understood on prime time entertainment. Similarly, to go back to our own show that we did, Satyamev Jayate, nobody would have understood. When I started doing that show, and I hope some of you are familiar with that show, when I started working on that show, everybody thought, and many people in my own company said that what kind of logic was I applying to put a show like that on an entertainment television network, because people usually came to be entertained. And the response to the show stunned everybody. I still remember the outcome on the first day, when the entire social media, Twitter and Facebook, were taken up by the excitement or the anticipation behind that show. And the kind of response that show generated is truly phenomenal. That tells you what the new India is looking at. You look at our film industry. A similar story is playing out there, where traditionally we have said, you need a hit film, you need one of the Khans. And you don't have that, doesn't matter. You need pretty faces to dress up the film, but that's about it. And yet, our own film, we did a film called Neerja early this year, which didn't have any major star cast worth its name, and it has gone on to become not just a critical hit, but a huge commercial hit. Similarly, films like Piku, a film like Queen, they're all playing out. And these are films that have no star cast. And audiences are willing to pay the multiplex ticket rates to go and watch these films. And these films are becoming commercial successes. Clearly, people are rejecting something and quietly embracing something, except that we, sitting in positions of influence, whether in corporate sector, whether in government, whether in bureaucracy or industry, often do not take note of that and keep pushing those stereotypes that we are comfortable with. In the distribution landscape, which is a very interesting story again, for the longest time, whenever I traveled, I work for a global media company, whenever I traveled to other parts of the world, everybody would talk about what a great business we had built in India under the Star umbrella, and then would come in the condescension. But the world is moving towards digital, and India is, of course, digitally not ready yet. Until about a year ago, when we launched our own OTT product called Hotstar, and it just completely stunned, we were all stunned by the response. Akamai, which which was the CDN provider, which provided the development, the delivery network for us, they told us that on big days when there was a big sports match or when there was big content playing out, Hotstar had the potential of slowing down the entire internet in the country. Such was the surge of traffic. In a country where data is still very expensive, most people are, don't even have access to quality data, even if they're willing to pay. And that's the kind of response that the country is giving to a very, very modern form of content delivery. Just to give you another example, English Premier League, it's not very big in India, but it's still a major property with a very high quality, urban, middle class, big city following. And we have the rights for the English Premier League. We put it on our television channel, Star Sports, and we also put it on our digital platform, Hotstar. And when the season data came out, we were looking at it. Almost twice the number of people had watched it on Hotstar as the number who had come in to watch it on television. It is a long-form game, fairly expensive to consume, in terms of data consumption, and yet people are just moving on. In terms of the quality of conversations that we see, again, if you move on and see what's happening on new media, the quality of conversations, there is the amount of freshness, the amount of challenge that comes. My friend Arnab Goswami is here. He, for many years, remained the sole voice of challenge and questioning on evening news television in India. And now, I think the only competition that someone like Arnab gets is from new media, from the conversations that ordinary people are having on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else. And that's the kind of change that's happening, which we are not able to fathom. And we are still living in denial because, we keep seeing, we keep wondering, is this country moving forward? And this kind of doubt, this kind of denial is rampant. I am both amused and somewhat embarrassed to say to you that a film like Jungle Book has been certified as not fit for unrestricted exhibition in India. It's Jungle Book. It's a story that everybody has read. Just imagine, let your imagination run wild and think what could possibly have been done by Disney in that film, that it is not fit for unrestricted exhibition. And that's the gulf, that's the polarization that I notice and I worry about. That the formal world, traditional world of older, seasoned, self-appointed guardians are moving backwards in history and time, and the rest of the country is moving rapidly forwards in time. And this gap is becoming increasingly wide. And at a level, there is a disconnect, but at another level, it is extremely dangerous, and it is creating false tensions that should not exist in the country, because we need to channelize all these resources so that we all move in one direction. There is a country, Ronnie talked about entrepreneurship. I think no one understands that better than him. But what I see in this country is that everybody that we speak to who's under 30, they have just one expectation from the government, from formal institutions: just get out of our way. They don't expect any support, any help from anybody. They just want them to remove the bottlenecks and get out of their way. People will find their own rhythm, people will find their own aspirations. Everybody is dreaming in that country. It's a mistake to see. My most favorite example is that, a couple of months ago when I was just looking at, one of the e-commerce sites, I came across, on Amazon, this group of people who were selling cow dung cakes. I don't know what's the volume of sales there, but it is the most mind-blowing experience that I had as an observer of Indian society. That somebody sitting in some remote place, actually thought that there was a market for a form of fuel which is which is probably the most quintessential expression of Indian backwardness. That those who don't have access to any kind of fuel, not even wood, are the ones who use these cow dung cakes for cooking. And here was somebody packaging it, selling it, and just out of sheer intrigue, I ordered a pack, and it was delivered in this fancy packing with an air cargo delivery. Does it get her more, does it get more positive and inspirational than this? People in India do not expect anything from people like us, or their elected representatives, or their governments, or their officials. They just want them to get out of their way, and they would figure it out. The problem is that there is this traditional world which is so insecure that it's always trying to come in the way, because somewhere deep down, they have this fear that, yes, people might, the larger, younger Indian population might make them irrelevant if they didn't force their way. And that's the funny dichotomy that's playing out in India. And, it is as a result of that an Arnab Goswami has to subject himself and his content to what is known as News Broadcasters Standards Authority. Is that correct? I think. In entertainment, every bit of programming that you see on Indian entertainment channels has to conform to a set of standards laid down by a bunch of people. And every day, the most inoffensive words, which all of us sitting in this room use half a dozen times a day, if not more often, have to be beeped out because they are not good for the morality of the country. And that is where the schism in the Indian society is becoming most disturbing. And I think these changes, which are very, very fundamental, or this gap or polarization that's very fundamental, is not limited only to Indian media. We see that all the time, but I think it's playing out everywhere. And in many ways, I am encouraged by the latter, that there are a bunch of people who are so determined to take charge of their own destinies that they won't allow any legacy institution to come in the way of their dreams. And that's where there is hope for all of us who live in India and who have a dream for India. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Uday. And we'll now have the Q&A session. We've been getting a lot of questions for Uday. And Uday, interestingly, one of the things that you talked about, and I'm going to go back to what Ronnie said about the smartphone is the reason we get stressed out. But you were speaking at some of the forum and you said how everything today is being consumed totally digitally, and you're talking about the example of your daughter. So I'd just like you to share that story, about how, young people are actually, experiencing the world today.
Yeah, that's exactly more to the point that I just made about how the perceptions of the country are way out of line with the reality of the country. And, how delusional we could be. I have a young daughter who just graduated 2 years ago, and she's a serious academic, chose to work for a company that, an NGO, that only works with parliament and members of parliament in helping them draft legislation and stuff like that. She's a social sector analyst. Clearly, she's very heavily into things like news and opinion. And I never see her. She's very well informed. Every time I have a conversation with her, she surprises me with her awareness and insights. And yet I have never seen her holding a piece of newspaper in her hand. And I asked her once, why didn't she read the newspaper? And here I am, who still has to read 6 newspapers in the morning, because otherwise, I feel unprepared for the world. And she never reads it. She says, I don't need to read it, because half the things that get printed in the newspapers, I've already seen them the day before. And anything that I need to read, I read it on my iPad, I read it on my phone, I read it on my computer screen. And this is how, and then I started inquiring, and almost everyone that I have asked in that age group, including people in my own company, they never read a newspaper. They don't read magazines, and still they are reading everything that's of relevance to them.
It's like they say, you know, Wi-Fi and battery power is the only two birth rates that we all need now to live as long as we have. But, you know, there's a couple of very interesting questions that have come up. I don't know whether we can show the iPad screen out there as well. And many of them are talking about things that the news media does very well, and some of them are talking about things that we need to do. So I'm going to start with one of the more positive things out here. You know, it says, I'm going to phrase the question positively. Indian media does not cover global events, but I'm going to talk about the second part of the question. When will we create a global TV series in entertainment, in documentary? When will we create our own Marvel universe? We have so many Indian stories to tell, both from the past and from the future. Do you see that happening? Do we go beyond the 1 billion to the 5 or 6 billion and tell them Indian media can drive an Indian culture globally?
I think that that ambition is just getting fired up among content creators. Both traditional media companies are waking up to it. Companies like ours have started thinking about that. But even more than that, I think the disruption will not come by sheer investment of resources. The disruption will come again from the disruption at the level of ideas. And I'm very encouraged by what these youngsters are doing. I don't think you will see a Homeland kind of series coming out of India for a long time, because there the Hollywood studios have a lockdown, and it would be difficult to sneak into that walled garden. However, somebody could create a $5 million drama or a $5 million film, which would be so compelling, purely because of the idea behind it, that it may go viral. Because one of the things we have to appreciate that one is the issue of resource and creativity. Also, the big challenge so far in the world has been distribution. You know, physical distribution had its own limitations, and there is a certain, for lack of a better word, there is a certain caste system that exists in that. You know, with Hollywood sitting at the top, and everybody else then coming at.
But now you have things like your own Hotstar, which is what, 50 million people like that?
Yeah, today a 18-year-old kid has the ability to shoot with his or her phone camera and create content, upload it, and make sure that it goes viral.
And do you see that as a threat to a company like yours? I mean, that a kid can create a serial? I mean,
I think there is a threat to all companies who are emotionally or financially locked into their legacy models. I don't think it's a threat to our company, and only potentially it's a threat to everybody.
I'm going to come to a couple of
comes
questions.
if you're not aware, if you're not alive to that threat. You have to be prepared to disrupt and destroy your legacy structures before somebody else from outside comes and does it. You don't do that, you're
And that's
danger.
interesting, so I'm going to just question you a little bit more on that. You did that once before when you came into Star. You took a successful legacy and you said, that's not enough and I'm going to do something new. How do you make sure that you're in touch with the youth of India? How do you know that 18-year-old, that guy who's making that great thing, how do you personally encourage it? Not as Star TV, but you personally.
So two things. First of all, I don't do anything, I really don't spend too much time looking at the business. I don't do, like Ronnie, I don't encourage PowerPoints and Excels. They're a reminder of my own
Guys, no
lack of
PowerPoints, no
understanding.
Excel sheets. That's the lesson from this session.
I don't understand that. And I see my role only as an observer of the social trends in my company. And I think that's the responsibility I take most seriously. My own background makes me somewhat qualified for that, background in liberal arts and journalism. And I still enjoy that, I think I must be, in every election, I go and travel through the state where the election is happening, because I just want to understand what's happening. And the other thing is that one of the things that we have started doing is that we've totally changed the demography and the age profile of people that we are hiring. We're dramatically, over-indexing towards younger demographics. And then we are aware the big challenge there is to be able to put up with the cultural disruption when that crowd brings in when they come in. They don't talk the way you've been trained to talk. They don't behave the way you've been trained to behave. But what they bring to the table is something totally unique.
Couple of questions that are very interesting. Do you think TRP ratings drive TV studios to focus on negative news? There's another one, which is also, I think, related, aren't your TV shows, particularly your serials, regressive and anti-women? Why do you not condemn violence against women? And why do you focus on the negative stuff? I mean,
So two things. First of all, cross your heart and tell me how many of, we don't do news anymore, but there is a very eminent person who will speak on news later.
we'll
But
wait for him. We'll ask him. We will
Yes.
ask him. We
However-
will ask him. We will ask him.
Yes, you must. You must ask him because the nation wants to know. But how many of you will really be turned on by a positive news item that's going to be coming up versus, you know, news is a source of comfort and security. In a world that you do not control, news tells you what are the things that you need to watch out for. And in there lies the fundamental issue of bringing in what's not right versus what's right. What's right is fine. We all, in our personal lives also, we worry about what's not right versus what's right. So that's part of the reason. That is not to condone the negativity and the cynical lens with which people look at it. I think we have a problem in India. We can talk about it later. But I
Yep.
can see that my time is up.
I think we do have some more time. They're going to come back to a panel with three of them. But one last thing. So what you just said to me is that we as a viewer are as much responsible for what you show.
No,
Because we like the negative stuff.
No, you are responsible for it, but no, it's not that just you like the negative stuff. That's what you expect from us, and that's a positive service to do. If I don't tell you that there is danger out there, then I am failing in my duty. I need to tell you. If I don't tell you that somebody who you voted for is running a scam on you, then somewhere I'm failing you.
Thank you very much. We're going to come back. Uday and Imtiaz and Arnab will join us on a panel again after a while. But thank you very much, Uday, for an excellent
Thank
thing
you
on
very
where
much.
the future of Indian media is. Thank you. And we